Songs of my people.
Let justice roll like a river. It's a biblical reference that's become a common metaphor. But on August 31st, 1955, this river, the Tallahatchie River in Mississippi, became the place where justice stood still. It was here, on this ground, where I'm standing, that the battered body of Emmett Till was pulled from these muddy waters. It took just 19 days for his white killers to be acquitted by an all-white jury that deliberated for less than an hour. But Till's murder, his mother's courageous decision to publicly display what had been done to her 14-year-old child, and that sham of a trial, those events sparked the civil rights movement. Emmett Till's murder was the beginning of a mighty current, a steady, unrelenting push for justice that hasn't and won't be stopped. So there's no better place than here in Mississippi, where the horrific injustice unfolded and where the systems that made it possible are still entrenched today, for the Mississippi Center for Justice and for you, our supporters, to make a stand. Today, 65 years after Emmett Till, MCJ is still fighting to ensure that justice rolls like that proverbial river, sweeping away, but more often, wearing away the generations-old systemic obstacles in its path. As one of our 2020 champions of justice, Stanley Rip Daniels, said, justice may not be immediate, but ultimately, you will get there. Our pursuit of justice is as constant and relentless as a river's current. And with your help, we will get there. With your help, justice will roll like a river.
Of all the people I see, there are some who look like me. Shades of almond and ebony. We have roots.
Welcome to Mississippi on the Potomac. COVID-19 prevented us from coming to you again this year, but we're happy to welcome you to Mississippi and to showcase the important work that MCJ has underway. You'll go behind the scenes with MCJ's attorneys and our clients as together we work to dismantle Mississippi's long-standing culture of injustice. You'll experience inspirational performances by the Triumph Vocal Ensemble and have an opportunity to bid on an original work of art created by Mississippi watercolorist Wyatt Waters, especially for this event.
"2020 was a nightmare. I would never want to see that again in life." I was working at Wendy's Highway 49, and they started letting people go due to the COVID. I've been living here 6 years before the pandemic. My hours and stuff got cut due to that. And then after that, end up being laid off. I tried to talk to the landlord, and the landlord wasn't trying to hear, what I was saying,
COVID-19 magnified long-standing disparities in Mississippi. When the economy began shutting down, people with low incomes and people living paycheck to paycheck, hard-working people like J.T. Williams, they were the first ones affected.
Despite a national and statewide eviction moratorium, landlords in Mississippi pursued evictions at an even higher rate than before the pandemic.
The disaster caused a domino effect, as low-income Mississippians were faced with losing their health, their jobs, and their homes.
I thought I was going to be on the streets. I was depressed. I couldn't see straight, I didn't know what I was going to do.
To get around the eviction moratorium, some landlords who included utilities in the rent payment turned off the power, trying to force their tenants out. Low-income tenants were now left with no job, no income, and no lights or running water. Can you imagine being unemployed, sitting in the dark, while all the food in your refrigerator spoils? Well, that's what was happening.
Many of the thousands of Mississippians facing eviction didn't even know there was a moratorium in place, or they didn't realize they had to actively apply to avoid being evicted. What good were these programs if no one was helping people access them?
That's when the Mississippi Center for Justice stepped in. By April 5th, 2020, MCJ had set up the only statewide eviction hotline to counsel Mississippians faced with eviction. We immediately began helping people work through the process needed to qualify for the moratorium. Sometimes we went to court with them to prevent evictions.
I called the hotline to get the information. When I went to court the first time, me and the landlord was at court, and once they called me to the front, the landlord was saying, I owed him like $800. He thought I was gonna get evicted, but the judge told him that he couldn't evict me because I was on the CDC moratorium. I ain't never been in court like that, and I never want to be like that.
In the summer of 2020, the state of Mississippi used money from the CARES Act to set up emergency rental assistance programs to help tenants make their rent payments. But it was the same story. People didn't know about the funds or didn't know how to access the funds. So, MCJ continued to counsel people about the moratorium, and we also advised them how to access the rental assistance funds that could keep a roof over their heads.
I got rental assistance, and after that I went and found another job. I'm catching up, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. And I appreciate the help through the CDC moratorium and the organization that helped me.
MCJ was there for the mother whose entire family contracted COVID while she was out of work for 2 months. She came home to an eviction notice posted on her door saying she had to report to Hinds County Court, and she had to report the next day.
We counseled a woman whose husband died of COVID. While she was still grieving, the landlord threatened this newly widowed woman with eviction.
A gentleman here in Harrison County was locked out of his house when he couldn't pay rent. His landlord had taken him to court, but he couldn't appear to plead his case because he had COVID.
There were people who lost their jobs while they were hospitalized and found themselves facing eviction as soon as they were released.
Since April 5th of 2020, MCJ has fielded calls from more than 400 Mississippians facing eviction statewide.
MCJ was able to take the initiative, create a framework for delivering service, and immediately begin filling the huge gap between government assistance and actually getting that assistance into people's hands.
It got to that point that I said, I'm gonna be okay. I got a job, and I got rental assistance. Everything, coming in place. I feel good. I feel good.
But for every JT Williams, there's another Mississippian who didn't find help in time. There are people living in motels, people living in their cars, and people who are homeless because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
And when the eviction moratorium expires June 30th, in just 12 days, hundreds more will be swept away by a tidal wave of eviction notices and legal judgments. MCJ has been at the forefront of the eviction crisis since the pandemic began. But now, even as the businesses are starting to reopen and the masks are coming off, our work is just beginning.
The Supreme Court has decided to take a case that will strip away all of a woman's rights. For over 50 years, they've said that we have this right, and this could take all of that away.
The Mississippi Center for Justice represents Mississippi's only abortion clinic in challenges to a parade of laws passed by the Mississippi legislature restricting the right of choice. One of these was passed in 2018, and it bans all abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Along with our co-counsel from the Center for Reproductive Rights and the Paul Weiss law firm, we went to court and immediately secured an injunction preventing that law from going into effect. The state appealed, and the Court of Appeals affirmed the injunction on the basis of 50 years of precedent, beginning with Roe versus Wade. The state then asked the United States Supreme Court to review the case, and on May 17th, the Supreme Court agreed to do so. This is an alarming development. In Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court held that prior to viability, which occurs at about 24 weeks, the decision about whether to go forward with a pregnancy belongs to the woman and not to the politicians. Therefore, states can regulate abortion during viability, but they cannot ban it. The possibility the Supreme Court will hold that Mississippi and other states can ban abortion at 15 weeks threatens the underlying rationale of Roe versus Wade. Hopefully, in this case, the Supreme Court will adhere to nearly 50 years of precedent and affirm the lower courts. But if not, the court could overrule Roe versus Wade completely, or could partially overrule it as a first step toward potentially casting it aside altogether in the future. So in this case from Mississippi, the stakes are very high. We at the Mississippi Center for Justice are proud to stand with our co-counsel and with the clinic in defending this fundamental right.
More than anybody's going to affect the poor women, the women who need it the most. Poor women who cannot afford to go to these private doctors and fly to different states to have abortions and don't have means to do that. This is who it's going to affect.
Laws like this have a particular impact on poor people, a disproportionate number of whom are people of color. This impact is acutely felt in Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the Union and has the highest Black population percentage of any of the 50 states. This impact is a big part of why the Mississippi Center for Justice represents the clinic in these cases.
That's what gives us our comfort, is knowing that the people that are fighting for us and alongside us, that they are amazing. The center, I don't have enough words to describe how grateful I am to the center. I honestly don't. The most positive outcome is for the courts to hold up to what they said in the beginning. That is that women should have the right to an abortion. Women should have that right to all choices. You don't pick and choose which choices to give somebody. They don't pick and choose which choices to give men. Why are they picking and choosing which choices we should have? You said it, and for 50 years you said it. The best possible thing they can do is hold up to their word on what they said.
Mississippi is known for its music, and a lot of that music was born here in the Delta, in songs of pain and struggle that looked ahead to a brighter day. We hope you'll be inspired by the voices of triumph as they sing a song full of the faith the darkness has taught us and the hope the present has brought us.
Till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound is one. We'll keep marching, fighting. We'll keep marching, fighting till the victory is won. Hold your head up, brother. Hold your head up, brother, till the victory is won. And keep on believing, sister. Keep believing, sister, till the victory is won. Till that day comes, let us march on till victory is won.
Although I left Nigeria, coming to the U.S., knowing that the U.S. is a place for safety, justice, and freedom. But when I came here, that is not what I saw at the first time.
Benson Adu is an evangelical Christian pastor who had been spreading the gospel in Nigeria. Reverend Adu's preaching made him a target of Boko Haram, a jihadist terrorist organization. The name Boko Haram translates to Western education is forbidden. Boko Haram has killed tens of thousands of people and has been named the world's deadliest terrorist group on the Global Terrorism Index. Reverend Adu was kidnapped at gunpoint, slashed, starved, and beaten by Boko Haram. When he managed to escape, the terrorists swore that they would find him and kill him. Wherever Reverend Adu tried to take refuge, they pursued him. When the terrorists threatened his wife, Faith, and his infant son, Donald, Reverend Adu decided that he had to leave Nigeria to keep his family safe. He kissed his wife and baby goodbye and boarded a plane for America.
I'm thinking when I leave so that the pressure is all on me to go away from the family and so that my families will be safe, and that is the most sad and hard part, which...
Reverend Adu had a visa to attend a religious conference in Pennsylvania. He stepped off of a plane in Atlanta, Georgia and said, "I am seeking asylum." But because the date of his intended visit had passed, instead of offering him sanctuary, immigration officials put him in handcuffs and took him to detention.
Because I've never had handcuffs on me before all my life. So I was asking the custom officer at the airport, are you sure I'm in the U.S. or I'm in another country? Because the treatment and what I saw was different from, the image you see of the United States outside, And I wasn't expecting for handcuffs to be put on my hands when I did not commit no crime. No. I was just here to seek asylum because my life is in danger in my own home country. But instead, I was put handcuffs on my hand and thrown in jail.
Reverend Adu explained his situation to an immigration judge. But that judge, who had a 98% asylum denial rate, denied Reverend Adu's claim and ordered his removal back to Nigeria and to near certain death. Reverend Adu appealed the decision, but remained in detention during the appeals process.
And mind you, what they call detention is a jail. It's like a jailhouse, like a prison house. Where they have people who have committed murder, people who did drugs, people who've committed other types of crimes. So you can imagine the horrifying feeling, and I'm running away to seek safety, but I was thrown into a jail. So.
During his third year in detention, Reverend Adu was finally able to call home to Nigeria and speak with a pastor from his church. And his pastor had devastating news.
And he's like, okay, there's something I have to tell you. You have to be strong, So, yes, that my wife and son was killed by the Boko Haram. So, I screamed at the top of my voice. And I was devastated.
While Reverend Adu had been sitting in detention, while a judge had ruled that he had no claim for protection, Boko Haram had murdered his wife and his toddler son in the street. And Reverend Adu's father, who was also a pastor, had been murdered by the terrorists in his own home. Based on the horrific murders of Reverend Adu's wife, son, and father, the Department of Homeland Security agreed to a remand and a new trial. But despite the overwhelming evidence that returning to Nigeria would be a death sentence, evidence that included the murder of his family, the same immigration judge again denied Reverend Adu's plea for protection. While MCJ handled Reverend Adu's appeals, attorneys at Alston & Byrd filed a petition challenging Reverend Adu's detention and won his release in February 2019. 7 months later, the Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in his favor. To find otherwise under these circumstances, the court held, would essentially mean that nothing short of actually being killed would satisfy the standard. The Circuit Court remanded Reverend Adu's case to the Immigration Court again, but this time to a different judge. After 6 appeals, 2 remands, and 5 years in detention, Reverend Adu finally won asylum.
The country was built on immigrants, so I know they have a lot of, things they say, some immigrants, they commit crime or they did this or did that, but there's always good and bad in this world. There are a lot of people, not only me, tons and tons of people who their life is in danger, who needs asylum, who needs help. There's a lot of immigrants who want to impact, who want to, do good. So when you're trying to stop somebody who's trying to do good, it means you don't want progress. You don't stand for freedom. You don't stand for justice.
There are too many Benson Adus. Too many immigrants who come here seeking sanctuary and freedom and are instead imprisoned as if they had committed a crime, and then are too often sent right back into the dangerous situations they fought so hard to escape. But sometimes we get a happy ending. An ending in which the United States lives up to its global reputation as a land of freedom and justice. After years in detention, Reverend Adu has built a new life, working as a truck driver and ministering to the homeless and hungry in Cumming, Georgia, a community outside of Atlanta. In May of 2021, Reverend Benson Adu married Lindsay Castro, and I was honored to be a guest at his wedding.
One of the reasons I like painting is that painting can say things without saying things. And it's such a disarming medium. I can say things with paint that would be much more difficult to say with words. I paint because I don't use words that way. So in this painting, we're talking about race in Mississippi, and we're talking about the injustice of Emmett Till and his murder. I remember we were planning this, and I was saying how it would be great if we had white robes, and the dark faces against the white robes has great contrast, but also it speaks to what the theme of this painting is about, why blacks and whites still have problems, and why there's such an inequity in our justice for the two.
Mississippi Center for Justice recently joined in the representation of Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson and 10 of his colleagues in suing Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, the Oath Keepers, and the Proud Boys over their role in the invasion of the Capitol on January 6th. The lawsuit is brought under the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which prohibits conspiracies to interfere with federal officials who are discharging their duties, which is exactly what the members of Congress were doing on January 6th when they gathered for the constitutionally mandated counting of the electoral votes. We are pleased to be working with NAACP, National General Counsel's Office, and the Cohen-Milstein firm and the representation of these plaintiffs in this very important case.
The fight for justice is long and never ending. But if we walk together, we won't get weary.
Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Walk and never tire, 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 walk and never tire. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Oh, sing together, children, don't you get weary. Sing together, children, don't you get weary. Sing together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Sing and never tire, 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 sing and never tire. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Shout together, shout, don't you get weary. Shout together, shout, don't you get weary. Shout together, shout, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Shout to never tire, 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 shout to never tire. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Oh, walk together, children, don't you get weary. Sing together, children, don't you get weary. Shout together, children, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. There's a great camp meeting. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land.
You know, both of our honorees tonight are very important people in the ongoing struggle to preserve and promote democracy in this country and to ensure a fair justice system. And I want to begin this next phase of the program by introducing Nan Aron, who I have known for at least 25 years and who I've known of for much, much longer, as so many of you have. Nan is a true visionary. When she started the Alliance for Justice in 1979, she recognized, long before most people, that the system of selecting federal judges was not some benign process divorced from the consequences, but instead was something that required from us a heightened level of attention and engagement. Obviously, her stage is a national stage, but we also see her work in our area of the country, down in Mississippi, as people all around the country and the various states do, because of her attention not only to the Supreme Court, but to the federal district courts and the federal courts of appeals. You know, Nan is stepping down this summer after 42 years leading the Alliance for Justice. We wish she could stay 42 more, but as she steps down, you know, the Mississippi Center for Justice is honored to honor her tonight. And we join many people around the country in thanking her for the wonderful things she has done and for the many ways in which she has made our country a better place.
Rob, thanks for that lovely introduction. We and our colleagues in the civil rights and public interest movements are galvanized as never before. And the Biden administration is making good on its promise to nominate public defenders, lawyers fighting employment discrimination and voter suppression, and those representing immigrants and Native Americans for judgeships. An entire new generation of lawyers who pursue public interest and civil rights work can know that doing so will not foreclose but open up opportunities to pursue judgeships. If Stephen Breyer heeds the call to leave the court, President Biden has announced he'll nominate a Black woman. There are several outstanding candidates waiting in the wings. My hope is that it's just the first of several openings on that court over the next 4 years. Reclaiming the Supreme Court for the people is imperative. At this time, when I am stepping down from Alliance for Justice, there is a temptation, even a tradition, to look back. But what I want to do is look forward. The stakes for our judiciary and our democracy are as high as they've ever been. Will we win every fight? No. But we now see a White House whose inhabitants believe in the rule of law. We see a country restore the decency that's been thrust aside. We see that Americans have chosen leaders willing to stand for what's right, like MCJ, a major force for justice in the South. Alliance for Justice will be standing with you, ready to fight first, now, and always. Thanks so much for this award.
Thank you, Nan. For me and our fellow Oberlin College classmates, it is hardly a surprise that you have had a lifetime of such successful activism. It's a special thrill for me to get to honor you this evening. I'm Martha Bergmark, founder and board member of the Mississippi Center for Justice, and it's my privilege to introduce Nan's co-honoree, Congressman Jamie Raskin. Jamie, what an honor for all of us at MCJ to get to honor you. Elliot and I were in the crowd at Republic Restaurant right here in Tacoma Park when you first announced your candidacy for Congress in 2015. We were all in, of course, but we worried about your leaving your leadership post in Maryland's state Senate. In 12 years as our state senator, you led successful fights to repeal the death penalty, to pass marriage equality, to ban the sale of semi-automatic rifles, and so much more. I watched you put Maryland and its legislature in the forefront of progressive change, even as my work at MCJ in those years had us fighting off ever more reactionary initiatives in Mississippi's legislature. It gave me political whiplash. That day, as you announced your bid for the U.S. House of Representatives, you memorably told us, "My ambition is not to be in the political center, it is to be in the moral center." Little did we realize just how important that commitment would be. Today, Jamie, we honor you for your resolute defense of that moral center when it was under dire threat. As lead prosecutor in Trump's second impeachment trial, your impassioned defense of the Constitution, democracy, and moral integrity, all at a time of crushing personal loss, inspired and uplifted us. My ambition is not to be in the political center, you said. It is to be in the moral center. And then you added, we will get the political center to move to us. At the Mississippi Center for Justice, where our work is to dismantle our state's entrenched culture of injustice, we take that as a call to action. We thank you for your irrepressibly progressive spirit and your practical approach to making change. We aspire to follow your shining example. Thank you, Congressman Raskin, for being with us tonight and in our shared cause.
Well, hello, Martha Bergmark and all my friends at the Mississippi Center for Justice. Hello, Elliot. Hello to everybody out there. It's a good thing this is not in person because I'm sure I would be crying with that beautiful introduction that Martha just gave to me, because it pretty much got me choked up just reading it on my iPhone. So I'm sure in person I would have been hopeless. Of course, I'm much more emotional these days in the wake of everything that's happened. But I want to thank you for this extraordinary recognition and this honor. I don't know that I deserve an honor from the Mississippi Center for Justice, but I tell you, I will work every day to deserve this honor and to try to live up to the surpassing ideals for justice and equality and freedom for everybody that your work advances every day. What I love about the Mississippi Center for Justice is that you don't just take a slice of life, like we're going to do criminal justice, or we're going to work on poverty, or we're going to deal with reproductive freedom. You take everything, and you are on the front lines of the struggle for the people of the state of Mississippi. And what a blessing that is for you to link us, people here in Maryland and Washington and Virginia, people in this area and people all over the country, to the struggles of people in Mississippi. So I'm really excited to be reading about the work you're doing, of course, to defend women's right to choose and reproductive freedom and women's health against these atrocious right-wing assaults in Mississippi. And I know that's going up to the Supreme Court. They've wanted to make Mississippi a test case for how far they can go in destroying a woman's privacy and her right to choose with her family and her doctor, her own medical decisions. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for always fighting for criminal justice reform and for people who've been falsely imprisoned and falsely accused. And I know you've won a big case recently involving long-term false imprisonment, and you're fighting for restitution and full reparation for that grave injustice that was done to one person in Mississippi and many, many more throughout that state and throughout our country. Thank you for fighting for the rights of the poor and working people when it comes to debt collection and bankruptcy. Thank you for slugging it out in small claims court to defend people who are being pushed around by the poverty industry and those who prey on other people's poverty. So for all of these different kinds of things you do, I am profoundly grateful. And I am grateful for this recognition for the work I did with my extraordinary colleagues on the team of impeachment managers related to January 6th. We're going to continue to hang tough for the Constitution, for the Republic, and for the country. And thank you, Mississippi Center for Justice, for hanging top at the state level for everything you do and for being an exemplary model organization showing how to fight for the rights of our people and for strong democracy in our states.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this virtual event connecting those of us in Mississippi with our friends and supporters on the Potomac and nationwide. It's my honor and privilege to recognize and thank our honorees, Nan Aron and Congressman Jamie Raskin, for their service to our country. The violent attack on our Capitol on January 6th, the events leading up to it, and the events since have brutally reminded us that the democracy we sometimes take for granted is more fragile than we ever believed. Over their careers, Nan and Jamie have exemplified the courage required to defend our democracy and are still in the fight today. Thank you very much. Thank you also to our presenting sponsors, Latham & Watkins, LLP, and Ellen Weiss, and to all of our generous sponsors and supporters at every level for making the work of the Mississippi Center for Justice possible. Since 2003, MCJ has been the leading voice for systemic change in Mississippi. Right now, we are smack dab in the middle of the largest civil rights fights of our times. From the release of Curtis Flowers, a victim of prosecutorial misconduct and 6 trials, imprisoned for 20 years and now released and free thanks to MCJ and its partners, to dismantling the vestiges of Jim Crow voter suppression and getting ready for the next round of voter suppression to come, to defending a woman's right to choose before the United States Supreme Court in the ongoing effort to chip away at the substantial and fundamental rights recognized by Roe versus Wade. We all know and have heard, in Dr. King's words, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. What is happening here will have a national impact on the country. Tonight, it's my honor to tell you about an award presented to our own President and CEO, Vangela Wade. In May, Black Voices for Black Justice, an organization that fights systemic racism by amplifying the voices of Black leaders, chose Vangela as one of a dozen or so national honorees. Stacey Abrams, the co-chair of Black Voices for Black Justice, personally called Vangela to tell her she'd been chosen for this prestigious award. Black Voices for Black Justice recognize not only the leadership, but also the passion that Vangela brings to the Mississippi Center for Justice. She intimately understands the injustice MCJ fights against because she's lived it. You may know that Vangela is a cancer survivor. What you may not know is that as a law student, Vangela ignored the obvious warning signs of cancer for 3 years, simply because she didn't have health insurance. She rolled the dice with her life, just like the other 300,000 uninsured Mississippians we are fighting for today. Vangela took the wheel at MCJ during a time of transition and financial difficulty. And as if that weren't enough, she and we were immediately faced with a global pandemic and the challenges of guiding the organization through that. So many people would have panicked. I was panicking, but Vangela said, we're not gonna panic. I never saw her blink. I never saw her waver. I'm so proud, but certainly not surprised, that Black Voices for Black Justice chose to celebrate Vangela's extraordinary leadership skills and commitment to fighting injustice with this honor. But I'm beyond proud, and again, not surprised, to tell you that Vangela has chosen to donate the entire $50,000 honorarium she received from Black Voices for Black Justice to the Mississippi Center for Justice. If we wanted a leader who put her skill, her heart, and yes, her money where her mouth is, we have definitely found that leader in Vangela. And in recognition of Angela's leadership and generosity, the members of the MCJ board have decided to match Angela's $50,000 gift. That's $100,000 as a result of this Black Voices for Black Justice Award. We are so grateful for everything each and every one of you has already given. But I hope you'll consider a matching gift or make a gift in any amount to honor Angela and to support the work of the Mississippi Center for Justice. Your gift will go on to change hundreds of thousands of lives for years to come. To close, I'll share with you what I've already shared with the MCJ staff, with Angela, with our members of the board of directors. 5 years from now, I think we'll look back at this place and this time and say, this was it. This was the time and the place where MCJ reached another level, where we stood face to face with the most critical civil rights issues of our times, and we made a difference for the people we serve. Thank you for all you have done so far and all that you will do in the critical days ahead.
Thank you, Walter. I was so honored to be chosen for recognition by the Black Voices for Black Justice Fund, an organization whose co-chairs include activists and political leader Stacey Abrams and activist actor Kerry Washington. As Walter mentioned, this award came with a $50,000 honorarium, which I was asked to invest in something that would enhance me as a leader. MCJ, this incredible organization that I'm charged with leading, is dedicated to dismantling Mississippi's culture of injustice. Everything about that culture was magnified by COVID-19. We saw the disparities in healthcare, job security, and financial resources between the wealthy and the poor, between white Mississippians and Black Mississippians, all magnified by that pandemic. And there is no way that education, already an area marked by extremes between the haves and the have-nots, will have fared any better, not just during the pandemic, but for the long term. Education in Mississippi has been a long-standing area of discrimination. Predominantly Black school districts that have struggled for decades with a lack of funding had zero resources to transition to virtual learning. Many of these schools are located in areas without access to broadband, and many of their students can't even afford lunch, much less the technology they needed for virtual classes. Those students who did have access to the internet struggled through virtual learning plans that often didn't even include an actual teacher. These children's parents didn't have the luxury of opting for homeschooling, paying a tutor, or monitoring their children's virtual attendance. While many of us were at home helping our own children navigate the complicated world of virtual learning and sometimes complaining about our privileged challenges, these parents were out there on the front lines, working and hoping that by some miracle, their children wouldn't fall too far behind. For some of us, this pandemic will soon become nothing more than a memory of an inconvenient time. But for these children, it's been a year of lost education, a year lost for some who were already so far behind that COVID could be the straw that cancels their futures. So when I thought about what I could do with the $50,000 gift that I was so honored to receive from the Black Voices for Black Justice Fund, I thought about those children. I thought about those families. The honorarium that I received will help fund MCJ's work to determine where the educational gaps widened due to COVID and to find a way to close those gaps. There are funds in the CARES and American Recovery Act that could help diffuse the educational time bomb if we work to ensure those funds go where they are most needed. Black Voices for Black Justice charged me with investing that $50,000 into something that would enhance me as a leader. As the president and CEO of MCJ, I believe this money should be used to raise the voices of the people we serve. And if this money can do that, well, that's what will make me a damn good leader.
Songs of my people.
It's an honor to paint this historic and sacred place. The story of Emmett Till and his murder is a story that needs to be told and retold. This past year, we've seen that race relations are still a problem. It will not go away or get better unless it's dealt with better. I want to apologize to the family of Emmett Till for this injustice. I hope this painting can bring attention to the ongoing discussion of race in Mississippi. I hope we can do and find a better justice for our future.
They were heroes, each one and all.
Can we find a better justice for our future? In the last year, we've seen nationwide protests against systemic racism on a scale we haven't witnessed in decades. Here in Mississippi, the legislature finally moved to replace the last state flag in America that still included a Confederate battle emblem with a new design. These are welcome signs of progress, but there is still so much work to do. It's common to hear that Mississippi's justice system is broken, but in reality, it works exactly as it was designed to work. Issues in Mississippi today don't just pop up. They're manifestations of a generations-old systemic effort to keep people of color, the poor, and other marginalized people oppressed. When people of color and people with low incomes get COVID-19 at a disproportionately higher rate, but are less likely to receive medical care, to be vaccinated, or to have paid sick leave, that's a manifestation of a racist and unjust system. In Mississippi, more than 300,000 people are without health insurance. That number could be cut in half if the state expanded Medicaid. When lawmakers play politics with the health of their state citizens, that's a manifestation of an unjust system. Nearly 20% of Mississippians live in poverty. Over half of those people are Black. That's a manifestation of a racist, unjust system. Mississippi's total population is 38% Black, yet 64% of incarcerated people in Mississippi are Black. That's another manifestation of a racist, unjust system. Real change comes from dismantling unjust, racist systems and replacing them with policies that promote equity, opportunity, and justice for all. That's what we're doing every day at MCJ, and your support is making that happen. Together, we're confronting the challenges facing racially and economically marginalized Mississippians head on. To continue the fight for justice, please visit our website or text the number on your screen and make your pledge now. You can also visit our auction site to bid on Wyatt Waters' painting, Justice Like a River. Proceeds from that auction will benefit MCJ. Our goal for this evening is to raise $400,000. Yes, that's an ambitious goal, but it's necessary for our work to continue. The challenges are so great, but someday, this war will be won. Justice will roll like a river, and you'll be sure that you were part of making that happen.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. One day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the glory comes, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. Glory. Oh, glory. Glory. Oh, glory. Oh, glory. 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 Bum, 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 bum. When the glory comes, it the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure, and we'll cry glory. Of all the people I see, there are some who look like me. Shades of almond and ebony. We have roots deep like the oak tree. Honey, jasmine, licorice, coriander. A potpourri of gifts from the earth. In our dance, the laughter of the children. Shining faces sing of our birth. Songs, songs of my people. Waters of the Nile, muddy waters of the Mississippi, like a tree that's planted by the river. We are royal, beautiful people. Emmett Till, Martin, and Malcolm, they were heroes, each one and all. Lives taken, yet not forgotten. Africa still standing tall. Songs, songs of my people. Songs